Daniel Ricciardo's role in Alpha Tauri has been clear from day one, but it seems like his mission to return to Red Bull has taken a massive hit. This time, it's his own teammate, in combination with the absolute disaster of a car that the Honey Badger had to drive in Spa, that led to the entire scenario of us not seeing Ricciardo close to the points finish. With just the second half remaining in 2023, it seems like there's not much hope about Ricciardo pairing up with Verstappen and returning to where he feels he belongs, as Tsunoda's statement has sent shockwaves across the entire F1 world. Will Red Bull be happy to consider Tsunoda as Perez's proper replacement? And how will this affect Ricciardo's contractual situation with both Red Bull and Alpha Tauri? Stick around to find out. The F1 world was delighted to witness the return of the Honey Badger, and although it was on loan from Red Bull, it's still something that made the sport a bit more interesting to watch with the current one-sided dominance from Red Bull. And to keep things in perspective, Daniel hasn't disappointed with his return. Quite the contrary, he's made a solid first impression in Budapest, out-qualifying and outperforming Tsunoda, maybe even cementing his position as the leader of the team from the first race. This is something that Ted Kravitz believes in, but after witnessing the Spa debacle of the Aussie, he was quick to admit that he was wrong. And if there's one thing that we should never do in the F1 sport, that's to underestimate Tsunoda. This time, Ricciardo's biggest enemy might not be Perez, but Tsunoda himself, as the Japanese driver has reached the third point for his team in the season, and he still stands as the sole points scorer for the Italian squad. Be that as it may though, there are still a lot of intangibles in the entire Ricciardo Alpha Tauri Red Bull situation, as the Austrian squad is now more focused on building a super team in the near future, which would involve a driver that could challenge Verstappen on a weekly basis, and not just in the first couple of races in the season, like Perez has done up until now. Regardless of that, Ricciardo might not be the best solution for the team, not just because of his age, but because of his failure to live up to the mission in Spa. This was the race in which Ricciardo headed with a lot of hope, as it's one of the best races in which he could have shown that he's worth replacing Perez. However, the entire weekend started with troubles, as he got his lap time deleted in Q1, and what was good enough to put him in Q2 just wasn't legally obtained. Therefore, the race was already doomed for the Aussie, but the same case was present in Budapest, where he survived a Turn 1 crash and had to climb the grid from dead last to P13, outperforming his teammate Tsunoda on the way. Now, not only did he finish 6 places below Tsunoda with a 24-second deficit, but Ricciardo also has to accept the fact that it was Tsunoda, the driver, who scored points for Alpha Tauri. Yes, not many would have expected Ricciardo to be actually brilliant in the second race of the season after a 10-race pause, especially not in the worst car on the grid, but what many expected was that he would take the reins in Alpha Tauri. At least that was the initial plan of the Italian squad when they brought him back, to bring back the team in the midfield and increase the value thanks to your character and your presence in the sport. We've been convinced that we're on the right track in Hungary, but from what we've seen in Spa, things have taken a massive downfall for Ricciardo, and the Aussie himself is not satisfied with how the car behaved in Spa. When talking about the outcome of the race, he couldn't hide his disappointment, as he went on to elaborate, "Honestly, I felt quite limited in terms of pace. Even in the clear air, I was struggling a lot. It was probably not what we were turning the tyres on. It felt like probably not producing enough grip, and then I was sliding and overheating really quickly. In clean air, we didn't break away from the back. We couldn't, and then it felt like they were able to get more out of their tyres early. I was normally getting overtaken while we all had fresh tyres, and then when it settled, I'd have better pace, but was stuck behind them. Obviously, that's not good for the tyres as well." Definitely, it's not good for the tyres, Daniel, but what's also not good for your future career as an F1 driver is that your teammate, the driver who you were supposed to humble and show the right way, has outperformed you on a straight merit and scored points before you did, ever since you became teammates. Yes, many would have expected this to happen, considering Yuki is in his 3rd year with Alpha Tauri, and he was the main reason that Nick de Vries got sacked, but we're talking about an 8-time race winner here, so who's the real victim of the entire situation? In times when P10 and P9 in the Constructors' Championship differ from each other by millions of dollars in prize money, every point counts. And with Haas and Williams, as well as Alfa Romeo, being the main targets for Alpha Tauri not scoring points in Spa, it's definitely a move in the right direction for the Italian squad. The issue with Ricciardo is that the right move was made by Tsunoda, and now the Japanese driver has made an even stronger case for being a solid replacement for Perez, and finally being given a more competitive car. Tsunoda is a driver who does struggle a lot with his temper and his bad habits of constantly swearing and losing his cool, but this year we've seen that he's been constantly hanging around the points, and alongside Alex Albon is definitely the most pleasant surprise on the grid. Therefore, putting him alongside Ricciardo was meant to be a genuine shock for him and a true shake for his self-confidence as a driver, but it seems like that hasn't affected him a single bit, as he's more confident that he could outperform Daniel and outrun him for the Red Bull seat. Yuki has also talked about this matter. He went on to say, "It'll be clear soon, but either driver will be slower and the slower guy won't make it to Red Bull. That's easy. The faster guy has more chance to go to Red Bull. It's how it works in Formula One. That's it. It's a challenge always. In the end, it doesn't make much difference. Daniel or Nick, whatever. Anyway, I have to do the same thing I was doing to Nick. You need to beat your teammate. That's the most important thing. Daniel is not an easy driver to beat, but at the same time, I'll do what I did in the last couple of races, and it's clear the faster guy will stay or go up. That's it." Yuki's mentality has shifted drastically, and while he's not receiving nearly the praise he should from F1 experts, that has started to change slowly but surely. One of the heaviest critics of Yuki, Ted Kravitz, the man who said that Yuki is no longer the leader in his team and everything is in the hands of Ricciardo, has praised the performance of the Japanese driver and said that he was very close to finishing P9 and swapping places with Stroll. What's even worse news for Daniel is that the setup the ATO 4 had on Spa was supposed to extract the maximum performance of the car, and no matter what kind of excuse he could find for his underperformance, the fact that Yuki finished in the points with only 2 drivers retiring from the race stands as a counter-argument for Ricciardo's bad race. Obviously, having to settle down with the fact that only 2 drivers finished the race lower than you, one of which is a rookie, and only 2 drivers retired from the race is not an easy mission, and Ricciardo will have a difficult 4-week period ahead of him. But when the racing is back in Zandvoort, the real race could be between Ricciardo and Tsunoda rather than Perez and Ricciardo. And while Red Bull have set sail on one mission, they might find an unbruised gem in Tsunoda, one that started to form slowly but surely into what we're currently seeing, but also one that needs to be worked on a lot in the upcoming period. Still, the skills in the worst car on the grid are limited, and Tsunoda is doing exactly what Ricciardo was brought in to do at Alpha Tauri: score points, or at least flirt with those positions. Right now, the situation isn't good for the Aussie. And as all things stand, Tsunoda will have some serious talks with Helmut Marko in terms of replacing Perez once the time comes.